Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy to welcome you all here for our talk on the ideas of activism and women promoting arts beyond their borders. On my left, we have Celia Birbragher from ArtNexus, the founder and now director and editor of ArtNexus, which we'll show to you here. And on my right, we have Ziba Ardalan, founder and director of Parasol Unit, Foundation for Art. And last but not least, Touria Glaoui, again, founder and director of 154, the African Art Fair. I think, it's pretty clear when we see, these women standing and walking or here in the art fair, walking around the art world, doing amazing things. I refer to each one of them as a founder because each one of them has contributed in some way, not just to the founding of their own organizations, but to the work that happens in so many parts of the world and in so many organizations like Pinta and like the organizations that they founded themselves. So I think, one of our first questions is going to be about this idea of, borders and really what does it mean? I think every one of us, except for probably Celia, who lives and works in Colombia, but who obviously does so much in the region in South America and Latin America, but also, of course, abroad. But the three of us here, myself, Ziba, and Touria, are, not, kind of English by birth, not, ethnically English, one would say, yet we've made our home in a city like London. So for you, I think each one of us, maybe we can talk about this idea of what, national borders and nationalism means in the work we do in the arts. Maybe Celia, since, you're somebody who's kind of based in your country of nationality, maybe talking about how you feel about positioning Colombian art, Latin American art within the context of the rest of the world.
Well, when we talk about, we can no longer in the art world talk specifically about a country, and we refer normally to Latin America, like this fair, but I would say Mexico and Argentina have nothing in common, and neither do the artists. The concept Latin America started maybe about 35 years ago, or maybe a little more, 40 years ago. Intellectuals and writers and critics were at that time really trying to get through the mainstream. And I guess the term Latin America was a good battlefield. We do have fantastic Latin American writers, and at the same time as those fantastic Latin American writers, which I don't think it's the point to mention them here, there were also great Latin American artists, but art travels much more slowly than literature. I think now the term Latin America is very well established, but at the time, 40 years ago, there was a lot of discussion about this term. So I don't think in the case specifically of Latin America, Latin American art, we talk specifically about boundaries, except when you say this artist was born, let's say, in Argentina but lives in New York, mm-hmm. or was born in Mexico and lives in Paris, or the other way around. Mm-hmm. Like Francis Alice, he lives in Mexico and he considers himself Mexican, like, or so many other artists. Mm-hmm. So I think we are in, artists are traveling all over the world and living in different places than their own. Mm-hmm. And as they live in each country, they of course
take on
part of what
that culture.
The culture. So I don't think at least I never think of an artist as where he comes from, except just to point out that he comes from or lives there. And I think I'm more interested in the work they do, and of course, wherever they come from, wherever they live, influence their work.
You made an interesting point, and I think before we go back to the point of borders and nationalism, about art traveling much slower than literature and much slower than the written word. Is that something that you thought of when you founded ArtNexus, this idea that bringing art to the written world?
I think when I found the magazine, I was thinking of Colombia. As a matter of fact, the first issue, the name was Art in Colombia, and it was almost like a joke. I started this magazine with my history of art professor, and there was art in America, so we're going to do art in Colombia. But it was more because we had no information. Okay, thank you. Sorry. Because we had no information of what was going on in the rest of Latin America. We got news magazines from the States, that more than anything else, but we had very little knowledge of what was going on in the rest of Latin America. So really the main purpose was and even Colombians had very little information about what was going on in Colombia. This has, of course, greatly changed with all the new technologies, but at the time, we didn't even have computers, not even fax. So this is, it's a changing world, of course, but at the time, the main purpose
was more to make a source of information.
Yes. And later on, I found out through, how fast literature travel and how slow it is for art to travel.
And Ziba, I think for you at Parasol, so often your shows are accompanied by extraordinary catalogs or your kind of involvement with catalogs of artists' work, even for their shows elsewhere. So for you, I think that idea of the written word accompanying an exhibition has been something that seems to be very important to you. Would you agree about that idea of the written word somehow finding a greater audience, or a maybe more quick audience?
I think what Celia says, is it okay?
Yeah.
Do you hear that? It's okay. What Celia said.
Oh. No.
So it doesn't work, this one. Sorry. So this should work, yeah. What Celia said is absolutely true. But there are maybe some exceptions. First of all, I think you're absolutely right that visual art travels slower. Probably not anymore at our time, but it used to, absolutely. The catalog that you were referring to, Alia, they're right. We try usually to get several writers looking at it, like at the work of the artist from different point of view. And we hope from the artist, if whatever artists from nationality are, but writers need to be from different nationalities and looking at the art from different perspective. So in a way, yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's.
And for you, and Touria, you have also, with the African Art Fair, you believe in, kind of a really impressive catalog. I think we had one here. And so for you, you were just talking about the idea of live streaming some of your talks to the African continent, but finding that technological, barriers are in the way. Oh.
Yes. That's okay, but they're all there. They should bring us more.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're not charged.
No, the borders, technology, and in Africa are completely, I think, an everyday life situation. So, and being an artist in Africa really means, having borders in any kind of way, from a literature point of view, from a visual art point of view. And unfortunately, as there's not yet so many art schools in Africa or any museum yet being built, whatever we're doing in London, because there's an audience for it, is really really needed on the continent. And today I think that the technology in some different places in Africa is good enough to receive a live streaming and being able to see those form that we do, but it's still very limited in terms of where we can live stream to and where the people will access it from in Africa. So we feel the borders when it comes to African artists and what we're doing around 154.
So we were actually discussing earlier kind of the difference of the national borders within an institutional context as opposed to an art fair context. And Ziba, you were saying, when you do a show, you don't want it to be about, a Persian artist, an Iranian artist, or an Asian artist, a Chinese artist, showing at Parasol unit in that way. But that we were saying within, like Pinta as a Latin American art fair, or 154 as the African art fair, that somehow is okay, and it's actually a way of bringing it to a broader audience. So maybe can we discuss a little bit about the idea of like an institutional classification as opposed to a commercial one?
Absolutely. Is it okay?
No.
You're having trouble with this lovely microphones technology there. I think the idea of the art fair and non-profit institution, which my foundation is about, are really two different things. I think it's perfectly fine to have an art fair like Pinta for Latin American art, or Spain and Portugal obviously included, and also about African art. It's perfectly fine because you're introducing so many artists to the audience, and it's just a wonderful way to awaken curiosity of the audience. But when it comes to a non-profit institution like Parasol in London, where a lot of different kind of art is exhibited, I have made a choice, a very conscious decision, that I am going to show one artist at a time mainly. We do group shows and we mix up all kind of artists together, but I would like to celebrate each artist separately for their endeavor, for their achievement, and I put them in par. Whether it is an artist from Italy, from America, from India, from Bangladesh, they are seen the same way. And I think that has a wonderful advantage because people are then listening, really looking at that art seriously. If an artist coming from, as I said, India, is taking the whole space and is doing well and is handling the space beautifully with work, that artist gets hugely respected and looked up. So there are really two different things: art fairs as promotion and non-profit institutions.
And the fact is that art fairs can kind of project that to the masses and, kind of reach an audience in a very different way. And of course, ultimately find a market for artists who need, funds and acquisitions to live. You were just talking about that there's a Bogota art fair, there's a Cartagena art fair. It's interesting within, kind of a maybe smaller, more limited market that there's this proliferation of art fairs in Colombia and in the rest of Latin and South America. Do you see that as a good thing for artists in the market, or somehow is it almost too much?
Well, I don't think there's ever too much of art. At least not for me. And I think more and more there are art fairs all over the world. There's a lot of art fairs in Latin America now. I also think, and this is not only me, but we keep thinking of how art fairs have taken the place of biennales, and how biennales are taking image of art fairs, how many biennales rely on galleries to get the work to their cities, and how art fairs are doing curated shows more and more.
With museum directors and very established curators.
Yeah, and very established curators doing shows in art fairs. So I think there's a fine line now between art fairs and biennales. Of course, the term biennale always seems to be so like grand. I always
And somehow overly intellectual.
yeah, but I always go back to the first biennale, which is Venice, and it was established because Venice wanted to have tourism. So that was the main purpose of creating a biennale. And more, the biennales focus on that idea, bringing people to the city, you know. There has been some great curators doing wonderful biennales, but there has been also some that are just not to the standards of what you expect to be a biennale. Okay, so, but I think.
But it's an interesting point of using, you know, I know, for instance, you know, Art Dubai, the Sharjah Biennale, are great moments for people from around the world to make that trip to go to the Middle East. And I've often heard from many international collectors and curators that somehow are reticent to go to the Middle East, you know, be they, you know, because of their religion or because of their politics or just, you know, misunderstanding of what it is to go to the Middle East. So they think, okay, well, I'll go with the rest of the art world to Dubai and go to Doha, and then it's okay because I'll be with the people I know. So I think that in a way that those art biennales and fairs and museum shows and openings, you know, are cultural tourism and are ways for people to kind of overcome their prejudices or their fears.
But I think there's a bit of a danger in that because, you know, this art culture trips that everybody is taking, like in a way, they seem suddenly very adventurous while they're actually going to very limited type of spots in the country where they're going to.
Well, I was very proud I went to Marfa last summer. So
yeah. No, but you know what I mean? They like feel like they know the country, but just going to a biennale anywhere in the world, which is very limited in terms to actually knowing the country, the people, etc. It's a beautiful trip, don't get me wrong, and obviously the discovering locations that are amazing and really obviously prepared for them. But I think that, you know, sometimes I hear people talk and saying, oh, they've been there and, you know, obviously they know the country really well because they went to Art Dubai or, you know, I'm not taking it as an example, but basically, you know,
they
that
saw very limited.
Exactly. So, but I mean, I know it's doing a great job for the country and bringing a lot of people there, but I think there's always this risk of limitation to really understanding, you know, what they're actually seeing because it's been catering for them rather than, you know, actually really discovering it, you know,
in the holistic
sense. Yeah.
I have nothing against it.
Yeah.
Okay. I think whatever you do to open people's mind is just fantastic. No, I'm older than you and Alia, and I know how the world looked in the 70s when I came from Persia in the 70s to Switzerland, to Europe, and how everything was so divided. There was this hegemony of Western population and then the rest of the world. So I think whatever makes people move around to open their mind, it's great, because that trip, that art culture trip to Dubai or Doha to Qatar and all that could be just the beginning of something. And I think we should take it. Whatever happens, I mean, the world with art tourism is better than a world without art tourism.
Agreed.
Yeah. Well, and you were in the Dakar Biennale.
Yes, I was.
Yeah. So,
but it's a bit different because the Dakar Biennale has been created as a platform to actually have an African platform for artists, which actually didn't exist anywhere in the world. So it was in response of, you know, what was happening in the West and not having enough representation for African artists that Dakar was created to start. You know, they needed a platform to basically give visibility to African artists that didn't have visibility outside Africa. So for us, borders are really strong. This is something African artists really feel. And actually, besides that Biennale in